everybody. It is Friday, August 30th. We've made it through another week. And August, apparently. What did Taylor Swift say about August, Jill?
I thought you'd never ask, Moshe. August slipped away into a moment of time because it was never mine.
There you go. You're listening to the Mo News podcast. By the sound of that singing, I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner, and I've been waiting for that my whole life, Moshe, so thank you. This is the place where we bring you, besides from my horrible singing, just the facts.
Just the facts, some singing, and a couple times a year we say it's going to be May, and at the end of August we talk about how August slipped away. I guess there's also like long December, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's November rain. There's, do you remember? The very.
Do you remember the 22nd night of September? Whoa, is that falling on a? That's on a weekend this year. We're gonna miss the 22nd night of September, but that's okay. Anyway, we'll see you back here. We'll be taking Labor Day off on Monday. We'll see you back here on September 3rd on Tuesday. Jill, any exciting Labor Day weekend plans? LDW, as the kids say.
Do they?
LDW. How was your LDW? Because you got MDW for Memorial Day weekend. They got LDW for Labor Day weekend.
Like all holiday weekends, just survive.
Survive.
No, I think we're going to see some fireworks on Sunday. Some college football is coming up, which we'll talk about.
Yes, we're heading into football season.
So yeah, just getting in the last licks of summer.
By the way, we'd like to ensure that you all know that Labor Day weekend celebrates all of you, the laborers of America. This is a holiday that came out of the late 1800s, came out of the union movement, actually, when American workers were working 12-hour days, 5-year-olds were working, and so there was a lot of pushback. And so the Labor Day weekend holiday was the beginning of a recognition of the American worker. And so just a heads up to all of you. Drink an extra drink this weekend or celebrate how you want to. Celebrate yourselves and the hard work that you do.
And for everybody who is working this weekend, thank you, whatever you're doing. Of course, there's doctors, nurses, firemen, etc., who can't take time off necessarily on those weekends. So thank you. Okay, let's get to some headlines. For the first time since becoming the Democratic presidential nominee, Kamala Harris sits down for an unscripted interview with the mainstream media outlet. So how did she do, and what did we learn about her policy positions? Meanwhile, some new poll numbers show that Harris has widened her lead over Trump, but it is still anyone's race. And Donald Trump says he wants to make the U.S. the crypto capital of the planet. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, an incredible evolution, because just a few years ago, he was talking about how corrupt crypto was.
To the Middle East, Israel kills one of the most wanted West Bank commanders as its operation there continues. The UN says that Iran has further increased its stockpile of uranium enriched to near weapons-grade levels. And the latest on that oil tanker burning out of control in the Red Sea because of a strike by the Houthis.
Yeah, this is especially concerning, and we're watching this very closely.
In Japan, millions told to evacuate as a typhoon batters the country. Back to the U.S., a Justice Department watchdog blasts the FBI over how it handled child sex abuse cases. Meanwhile, 6 more deaths have been linked to that Boar's Head deli meat Listeria outbreak. What inspectors found in that facility linked to the outbreak. A little scary. And finally, traveling this Labor Day weekend, expect record crowds and lower prices. But where are people going? We have got the top destinations. Plus, it is Friday. Cheers to the freaking weekend, what we are watching, reading, and eating.
And a special shout out, what I'm reading this weekend, Jill, is about not watching anything at all. So stay tuned.
Well, that kind of ruins the segment, but...
I'm still watching stuff. But we talk about why... Well, the difference is that not watching less can have on your brain.
All right, let's start with politics. And Vice President Kamala Harris, along with her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, sat down for their first unscripted interview with a major media outlet since Harris became the Democratic nominee. She talked to CNN anchor Dana Bash from Georgia, where she is currently on a bus tour. And that is notable because it looked like the Trump campaign had a lock on Georgia when Trump was running against Joe Biden in 2020. Biden won Georgia by less than a percentage point.
Yeah, actually less than 12,000 votes. That's how close it was last time.
And the state is one of the more competitive election battlegrounds this year. Harris on this bus tour, even going to the suburbs and some rural areas away from Atlanta, usually Republican strongholds. In a statement on Wednesday, now back to that sit-down interview. In a statement, Trump's campaign mocked Harris, saying that she had, quote, finally mustered up the courage to sit for a joint interview, emphasizing joint, after 39 days of hiding out from reporters. What we watched for, where Harris drew differences between herself and her policies and those of President Biden.
Yeah, I should note, joint interviews are pretty common. In fact, Trump has done one with Vance, Trump did one with Pence, Hillary did with Kaine, Obama did with Biden, Biden did with Harris. But the difference so far is just how rare Harris's interviews have been. So they're making light of the fact that, her only interview is a joint interview. And in fact, she probably should have done some more solo ones by now. But here they are together. I imagine she will do some more solos in the future. And so let me go through a couple of the headlines from the interview, Jill. And as I do that, the first thing I'll say here is this was a do no harm interview. I don't believe it changed the game here. It was a 1 hour special on CNN. The interview itself was about 25 or so minutes, at least what they highlighted in that special on CNN. I feel like it achieved the goal here, which is do an interview, take some pressure off, and do it without any major follow-up. I don't think she gained many voters last night. I don't know if she had lost any voters last night. She answered some basic questions. I think one of the issues they're having here with this campaign is there's so much pressure on this interview because she hasn't done any. And so they definitely need to do more of this. So there's less scrutiny of every single interview here. One thing I will also say as a former TV producer is TV is about visuals. The visuals here weren't great for her. The makeup, the lighting, the background. There's all these coffee cups in the background. She looks very short in the interview. It actually looks like it might be set up between Dana Bash and Tim Walz in the interview, and then Kamala Harris is sort of just sitting there. So just from a visual standpoint, if you're watching on mute, not a great visual for her, but ultimately let's focus on the content here. They began with the question of day one, which is, what are you going to do on day one if you are the next president? Harris had a very general answer here about what she'll do on day one, sort of struggled here. She said she's going to be there for the middle class. No specifics in terms of executive orders or any specific policy. Now, of course, we should be honest, not much gets accomplished in a single day as president. But ultimately here, it doesn't look like she was prepared with a very specific response here, a very forceful response as, I'm president, this is what we're doing. She again spoke in general terms about just, being there for the middle class. The focus at the outset here of this interview for a bit was Harris's shifting, evolving policy positions, what's been called flip-flops, right? Her changing positions on fracking. She was against it. Now she supports it. On the border, she had talked for years about a decriminalized border. Now she's putting out ads, as we've talked about on this podcast, where she's showing the border wall, that she's tough on the border and illegal migrants crossing the border. So there was some follow-up on the fracking. Remember, as a candidate back in 2019, she said she would ban fracking. She was a supporter of the Green New Deal. Now, in recent years, she has said she supports fracking. She will not ban fracking. She didn't do it as VP. She said she's not going to do it as president. And Dana Bash of CNN tried to get at the larger question here was, why did it shift? On fracking, she did say she, has learned new information, that ultimately they can accomplish what they need to on climate change without banning fracking. As far as the border is concerned, there wasn't much follow-up here. She was asked, you said a couple years ago, you believe in a decriminalized border. Now you're campaigning hard on border issues. What's that about? And effectively, on the border, she didn't really explain that shift. She just said, listen, I've been a border state attorney general. I will enforce laws. That's what I'll do, without really addressing the evolution on the issue, which then leads Dana Bash to ask a larger question, which is, how are we to perceive these policy changes? How should voters take them? Take a listen here to the question and Harris's full response.
How should voters look at some of the changes that you've made, that you've explained some of here in your policy? Is it because you have more experience now and you've learned more about the information? Is it because you were running for president in a Democratic primary? And should they feel comfortable and confident that what you're saying now is going to be your policy moving forward?
Dana, I think the most important and most significant aspect of my policy perspective and decisions is my values have not changed. You mentioned the Green New Deal. I have always believed, and I have worked on it, that the climate crisis is real, that it is an urgent matter to which we should apply metrics that include holding ourselves to deadlines around time. We did that with the Inflation Reduction Act. We have set goals for the United States of America and by extension the globe around when we should meet certain standards for reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, as an example. That value has not changed. My value around what we need to do to secure our border, that value has not changed. I spent 2 terms as the Attorney General of California prosecuting transnational criminal organizations, violations of American laws regarding the illegal passage of guns, drugs, and human beings across our border. My values have not changed.
So you saw that Harris made it about her values here, but I think that this will certainly come up in the debate on September 10th if that happens, in future interviews, which is getting at the why. The why did you shift? Did you learn new information? Did something change? Why do you have the views that you have today? And I don't know that she put those totally to rest. As far as other highlights from the interview last night, she was asked about inflation, grocery prices, and the fact that there's a lot of Americans who say, hey, listen, life was better for me and more affordable for me during the Trump days. Harris acknowledged that things have gotten more expensive. She talked about how, when they came in, it was the height of COVID. They were trying to prevent a larger recession and depression, and they've accomplished that. They've brought inflation down. She didn't get into the fact that on their watch, inflation also went up a lot. She did try to explain in context that inflation went up around the world, and the U.S. has been able to bring down our inflation rate quicker than others have, which is true. And to the larger question of, Dana Bash asking, you're campaigning on all these things you're going to do, but you've been in office for 3.5 years. Why haven't you gotten those things done? She did fall back again on the fact that they came in during a pandemic, that they are proud of their record. And that speaks to a larger issue. One thing we've been waiting for, which is, will she differentiate herself, separate herself from President Biden? And based on last night's interview, it does not appear that she has any plans to separate them at all. She stood by him. She praised him. In fact, at one point, she's asked whether she had any regrets over saying Biden had the capacity to be president. You might remember the last interview that she did actually was the night of the debate. They put her on TV after, Biden did terribly in that debate, and she defended him. Dana Bash asked about that last night. Take a listen.
Vice President Harris, you were a very staunch defender of President Biden's capacity to serve another 4 years. Right after the debate, you insisted that President Biden is extraordinarily strong. Given where we are now, do you have any regrets about what you told the American people?
No, not at all. Not at all. I have served with President Biden for almost 4 years now, and I'll tell you, it's one of the greatest honors of my career, truly. He cares so deeply about the American people. He is so smart and loyal to the American people. And I have spent hours upon hours with him, be it in the Oval Office or the Situation Room. He has the intelligence, the commitment, and the judgment and disposition that I think the American people rightly deserve in their president.
When it comes to Biden policies, one thing she was asked about was foreign policy, particularly Israel and Gaza. She was asked whether she's going to have any different policies in regards to the Palestinians, Israelis. Effectively, she said no, that what you see right now with Biden policy is what you can expect from a Harris administration. Notably, Dana Bash also tried to ask her about some of the personal attacks she's been getting from Trump, including the fact that Trump said recently that she turned black overnight. It's something Trump has said a couple times, including to a black journalist conference, that she was Indian, now she's black. You have to ask her what she is, even though she is biracial. We know that one parent is from India, one parent is from Jamaica. She was asked and given an opportunity to respond to that, effectively just saying, next question, please. She clearly did not want to engage with that question or make a headline on that or really elevate that allegation by Trump. Now, we mentioned this was a joint interview. Tim Walz was sitting next to her. At times you forgot he was there. They would go to the wide shot. You're like, oh, Tim Walz is still sitting there. Dana Bash didn't really seem to care for most of the interview. She was there because she had Kamala Harris there for her first opportunity. So she didn't feel obligated, for a while there to ask him any questions at all. She spent very little time on him. Basically, the only memorable clip of Tim Walz last night was Dana Bash asking him about things he's misled on. We've talked on this podcast about his military record and questions about claims that he's made and where it actually stands. At one point in his career, he said that he carried weapons in war. At the time, he was talking about gun control and a school shooting and talking about weapons of war. He was asked, why did you say you carried weapons in war? You were never in Afghanistan. The closest you got was Italy, where you were on a base there. He sort of tried to dance around it. She followed up, and he said, listen, I don't always have great grammar. My wife, who's an English teacher, will tell you that. No real follow-up there. We should mention, as part of her question, she also invoked the fact that he had said that they'd had their kids through IVF, even though technically it was IUI. Separately, in her question, she also invoked the fact that back in 2006, when he was running for Congress, also a part of Bash's question was back in 2006 during his congressional campaign, he lied. His campaign lied about a DUI he had in the 1990s when apparently he was driving 40 miles per hour over the limit. It was a 55. He was driving more than 95 miles per hour, drunk, failed a field sobriety test. When his campaign addressed it, this was his congressional campaign 18 years ago running for Congress, they said, listen, he had not been drinking that night. In fact, they let him drive to jail that night. It was a misunderstanding due to hearing loss from his time in the National Guard. That's why he failed the field sobriety test. It was due to a misunderstanding, not actually drinking. That was a lie. And so you have the DUI issue, the IVF thing that's more recent, the military record stuff. And again, he just basically only addressed the military record stuff as that he doesn't always have proper grammar. Again, no real follow-up there. And that was one of the questions, I think you come out of this whole thing, which is I don't know how much time Dana Bash had, but it didn't seem like she had that many opportunities to really follow up multiple times because they did what politicians do, which is they don't answer the question the first time. Sometimes they don't answer the question the second time. So you having done these before at CBS, have a finite amount of time. So you have to wonder, do I need to go at that question a third time or do I move on to the next thing? And for the most part, they were able to get away without having to answer several of her questions a couple times as she moved on to another topic.
Now to that new polling that we mentioned, a Reuters Ipsos poll out Thursday shows that Harris leads Trump 45% to 41% nationally, with the vice president sparking new enthusiasm among voters and really shaking up the race ahead of the election, which is on November 5th. So she has a 4 percentage point advantage among registered voters, which is wider than the 1 point lead she had over the former president in a poll taken in late July. This new poll has a 2 percentage point margin of error. It shows that Harris is picking up support among women and Hispanics. Trump still leads among white voters and men, both by similar margins as back in July, although his lead among voters with a college degree did narrow in this latest survey. And in the 7 states where the 2020 election was closest, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina, Michigan, and Nevada, Trump had a 45% to 43% lead over Harris among registered voters.
A way to sum that up really easily, it's a tie right now.
Yeah, neck and neck.
She's going to have a national lead. So did Clinton. So did Biden. Ultimately, the way the Electoral College works is they got to win some key states. And it effectively is neck and neck there, depending on what poll you look at. It's all within the margin of error, effectively. It'll come down to turnout. And early voting will start in the next couple of weeks here, Jill. So depending on where the polls are will be indicative of where the early votes are. So it's not like you wait for the polls the last week of October anymore. Ultimately, there's already going to be tens of millions of votes cast over September and October. So where the election is starting next week will already determine the vote here. And I should say that if you do some polling analysis and was looking at some in the Washington Post, she actually, in terms of Kamala Harris, not doing as well as Biden was over Trump in 2020, nor as well as Hillary Clinton was over Trump in 2016 in terms of the advantage, because there is a slight polling discrepancy still in favor of the Democrats. So they need to be above and beyond +1 or +2 or +3 to ensure they win, given that there is a bias by Trump voters against talking to pollsters. It still appears. So among what we're hearing from Republican strategists right now, it's obvious that running against Harris is more challenging for Trump, given the shift, but it's certainly not insurmountable. Right now, Trump has to focus on not scaring away any voters who are leaning his way, and that's why every major headline every day matters here. Right now, you do see excitement on both sides. 73% of Democrats say they're excited about voting after Harris entered the race. 64% of Trump voters say they're more motivated by backing Trump than opposing Harris. This has always been a key thing to watch is, are you motivated to vote for your person or against the other person? And now you're seeing motivation on both ends to vote for their person. That was an issue for Biden. People basically were voting for Biden because they didn't want Trump. In this case, you do see some more motivation for Harris. Right now, Trump's still leading when it comes to the economy by a pretty wide margin. Harris leads on abortion, which, based on the poll you read, is the third or fourth most important issue in the country, but still inflation, economy, key. And that's where Trump has an advantage.
Another political story that we are watching, Donald Trump going all in on crypto. He's pumping the Trump Organization's new crypto platform, which has just been rebranded from the Defiant Ones to World Liberty Financial. He posted this video on X Thursday morning to his 90 million followers.
This afternoon, I'm laying out my plan to ensure that the United States will be the crypto capital of the planet. They want to choke you. They want to choke you out of business. We're not going to let that happen.
It's not exactly clear who they is or what this is all about. In his post, Trump also tagged a verified account on Twitter or X called World Liberty Fi, or WLFI. That account has more than 20,000 followers. The project also involves Trump's sons, Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump. Again, not clear what this is about, but Don Jr. recently said the family was trying to develop a crypto platform that would, quote, rival the traditional banking system. And then Eric had told the New York Post that the project involved digital real estate. So TBD.
Yeah, they're really playing into the bro vote. You see that with Elon Musk. You see that with Robert F. Kennedy. And Trump has really done an about-face here because just a few years ago, he called it crime-riddled and that crypto was a scam. And then only last month, he was the featured speaker at a Bitcoin conference where donors were asked to pay upwards of $800,000 to sit at a round table with Trump. So he's gone from this is very unlawful to I am all in here. In the past couple of years, Trump has bought and sold millions of dollars in digital assets. He's been selling NFT trading cards, non-fungible token trading cards with his face on it, put out ads. There was an ad that came out earlier this week, Jill, where he was selling non-fungible tokens. And if you bought enough, you actually got a piece of his suit from the last debate. He's cutting up his suit into pieces. And then if you buy enough NFTs, you get a real-life Trump trading card with just a small bit of the fabric from the suit he wore in the Biden debate. Apparently is already starting to sell. And then if you buy enough of those, you have a chance to have dinner with him in Mar-a-Lago. Some people on Instagram asked me, like, is this real or is this an SNL sketch?
A piece of the suit?
A piece of the suit. It sort of reminds you of religious things, like a piece of cloth from the Pope or something. Trump's selling, they've sliced up his suit literally, and they're selling it for a price for fundraising purposes. So if you want a piece of Donald Trump's suit, there's a website you can go to and get involved in that. The Trump campaign, though, is big on the crypto here. He says he's raised $25 million from crypto investors. For too long, he says it's been squeezed by the big banks, financial elites. And so it's very interesting here, the embrace of crypto. If you're an owner of Bitcoin, Ethereum, any of that, you've seen the assets go up. And the bet is that he'll be much more open to it than the current administration or even a Harris administration, where they've been much more reluctant to embrace crypto. Again, seeing crypto as something that is used by criminals and not necessarily seeing the positive in it. But but interesting strategy here from Trump as we watch a bunch of headlines. Jill, as we're speaking here and recording this podcast, there's a headline out from NBC News. Trump has done an interview with NBC. And this is interesting, given what we heard at the DNC last week. Trump says that if elected, he will not only protect access to IVF, but he will have either the government or insurance companies cover the cost of IVF for all American women who need it. This, of course, comes out of the fact that Republicans have been taking a lot of incoming on IVF. Democrats have made it a huge issue. Why? Remember back in Alabama, we told you earlier this year, that's where they went so far as to create questions about whether IVF could be done because of personhood amendments, that frozen embryos are considered people, are considered humans. That led to a lot of pushback, including from Trump and other Republicans who are like, whoa, we're not IVF. This has gone too far when it comes to the pro-life crowd. But nonetheless, the damage has been done. And so you've heard Democrats pound Republicans on IVF here, leading Trump here, apparently, again, to say that he would like in a Trump presidency to ensure that insurance companies or the government pays for IVF under a mandate, how that would go down, whether Congress would support it, how much it would cost, all unclear at this point, but certainly trying to do damage control there on the Republican side and reinforce to Americans that they're as pro-IVF as Democrats are. So it appears here, Jill, with crypto and IVF, trying to hit both the crypto bros and also women in the past day.
It's like the kitchen sink strategy. Moshe.
You're hearing it from both candidates. Don't be surprised if you hear more promises in the coming weeks as they try to win your vote.
Okay, time now for the speed read. Let's start overseas with the latest in the Middle East. Israel's military says that it killed a prominent Palestinian terror commander of the Islamic Jihad group. It comes as it's conducting a major operation in the West Bank, which appears to be one of the largest in recent years. Hundreds of Israeli troops launched raids in several areas of the northern West Bank, carrying out mass arrests and engaging in gun battles as part of this operation. It said was needed to stave off terrorist attacks on Israelis. Palestinians say the sweeping incursion could fuel further violence and hamper access to healthcare and other essential services. The IDF announced Thursday that Mohammed Jabir was one of 5 militants that forces killed inside of a mosque after exchanges of fire. He was the commander of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and one of Israel's most wanted men for his role in planning and executing attacks. The health ministry in Ramallah, which is the capital of the Palestinian Authority, said in a statement Thursday morning that the death toll from the raids had risen to 12.
Yeah, so you're seeing these raids right now as the Israeli forces are increasingly concerned about Hamas, Islamic Jihad, these groups getting stronger in the West Bank. Remember, the West Bank is that kidney bean-shaped area to the east of the main part of Israel along the Jordan River there. It's the West Bank because it's the West Bank of the Jordan River. That's where you have about 2.5 million to 3 million Palestinians and about 500,000 Israelis, and has been a more stable area than the Gaza Strip, a separate area down there on the Egypt border in between Israel and Egypt there. But you have seen the popularity of the terror groups rise there, and the Palestinian Authority, which governs there, increasingly seen as corrupt. So people are turning to these groups, feeling that based on what they saw in Gaza, that they want a certain part of the population wants to take the fight to Israel. And so Israel has been increasingly concerned in recent months that they're seeing coordinated attacks from there. It comes as a top Hamas official, Khalid Mashal. He's one of them who lives in Qatar. He called for the resumption of suicide bombings from the West Bank against Israel. If you recall, for about more than a decade there were suicide bombings. Palestinian suicide bombers would go into Israel and blow themselves up in restaurants, on buses. And so Hamas says they would like to return to that strategy. They want to return to suicide operations. The Israelis, by the way, are also concerned about what's happening in the West Bank, that Iran is running guns and weapons into the West Bank, trying to foment unrest there, create terror attacks, potentially get rockets and missiles in there to create effectively what they had in Gaza. There's been reports of things getting across the border from Syria and Jordan into the West Bank. So the Israelis have launched these raids there. The Palestinians have protested, and notably, Jill, the Palestinian Authority government, which is the official government, which officially has been negotiating peace with the Israelis, recognizes Israel's right to exist, has gotten so unpopular and sees where Hamas has gone that they claim they're fighting alongside Hamas here against Israel, despite the fact they typically coordinate with Israel on operations to take out terror groups. So an increasingly unstable and precarious situation you see developing there in the West Bank.
Also in the region, from the Associated Press, Iran has further increased its stockpile of uranium enriched to near weapons grade levels, and that's in defiance of international demands. And this is according to a confidential report by the UN's nuclear watchdog. The report by the International Atomic Energy Agency, seen by the Associated Press, said that as of August 17th, Iran had 363 pounds of uranium enriched, up to 60%, which is a big increase since the IAEA's last report in May. What does that number mean? Well, uranium enriched up to 60% purity is just a short technical step away from weapons grade levels of 90% by the IAEA's definition. So if you do the math, Moshe, it means that they would have enough uranium enriched for about 3 atom bombs.
Yeah, so there's a lot of technicals here in terms of uranium enrichment, et cetera. The larger concern is that they're moving closer and closer here to basically being a couple of weeks away from having a nuclear bomb. So right now, the IAEA, this UN agency, says they cannot guarantee that none of Iran's centrifuges may have been peeled away for secret activities. Iran has always said we need nuclear power plants, but in a country with as much natural gas and oil, it doesn't really make much sense to have nuclear power. The thought has always been that it's a cover for creating nuclear weapons. Why is nuclear weapons so significant? Well, they kind of look at Kim Jong-un over there in North Korea, and they're like, he's unstoppable. They can't really replace him because of his nukes. We, the Islamic regime of Iran, would like to have nukes, so people will be scared to replace us one day. They see it as an insurance policy of sorts. Now, the U.S. has negotiated, the world's tried to negotiate, tried to prevent them, give them incentives, use sanctions, etc. But Iran increasingly sees nuclear weapons here as a potential tool to preserve the regime, and that's where we're at. And it'll be, and as we've noted on this podcast, it's a major concern for whoever takes office and wins the election in November here in the U.S.
And then there are the Houthis. Iran has announced that its proxy group, the Houthis in Yemen, has agreed to allow tugboats and rescue ships to reach a damaged crude oil tanker in the Red Sea. The Houthis targeted the Greek-owned ship as part of a 9-month campaign launched after October 7th in solidarity with Hamas. U.S. officials later warned that this vessel might be leaking oil, warning of the potential for up to 1 million barrels of oil to be spilled into the Red Sea as a result of the Houthis' offensive.
So the Houthis blew up the ship, and they said, oh yeah, we'll let you take tugboats in there and rescue ships to deal with this tanker after it's been burning in the middle of the Red Sea here. They're trying to avert what could be a pretty bad environmental disaster here. The tanker apparently has 1 million barrels of oil. Just to give you perspective, some of you might remember the Exxon Valdez disaster in Alaska back in '89. That was one of the larger oil spills in history. This tanker alone has 3 times the amount of oil that the Exxon Valdez had. So this is extremely concerning. This has been one of the concerns about the Houthis, continuing to just lob bombs at various ships passing through the Red Sea. And so the hope is that they can get to this ship and avert a major oil spill. It's a story we're certainly watching.
Staying overseas from the BBC, Japan has issued its highest level alert to more than 5 million people after the country was hit by one of its strongest typhoons in decades. At least 4 people have been killed and more than 90 injured after Typhoon Shanshan made landfall in the country's southwest. Hundreds of thousands of people have been left without power.
So this is a major typhoon. It's also having an economic impact here. Toyota, Nissan, and other companies have had to temporarily halt production at some factories in the region here. And as the storm makes its way across the country, Japan taking this very seriously. We'll keep you up to date over on the Instagram feed throughout the weekend.
And back here at home, this story from NBC News, just a warning. If you are listening with children, you might want to skip the next 2 minutes or so. This one is hard to listen to. 3 years after the Justice Department's internal watchdog slammed the FBI for its failures in the case of convicted sexual abuser and former U.S. gymnastics team doctor Larry Nassar, an audit out Thursday shows that the Bureau is still failing to protect children who have been sexually abused. This new report by the Justice Department Inspector General Michael Horowitz reviewed a sample of 327 cases and found that 42 were so deficient that auditors felt compelled to contact the FBI and urge immediate attention. In one case, the audit found that a child continued to be sexually abused for 15 months And another child victim was abused by the same person while the FBI failed to investigate the case. The IG reported on a separate FBI review that found another such example in which a 2-year-old was being abused for 21 months while the FBI sat on the case and failed to take investigative steps. These cases mirror what happened in the Nassar case, even though FBI Director Christopher Wray assured Congress and the public that it would never happen again.
Yeah, this is a big deal because in that Nassar case, the report found that an additional 70 gymnasts were abused during that year of inaction while the FBI failed to investigate allegations. In nearly half of the cases examined, the Justice Department watchdog found no evidence that the FBI complied with mandatory reporting requirements to alert state and local authorities about the allegations. In just over 40% of cases, it wasn't just a lack of documentation on file. The FBI needed to take additional investigative steps here. So some pretty concerning numbers here from this report. In response, the FBI has suggested that this was mainly just a case of failing to properly document files. But again, the report here says that this wasn't just paperwork. That's getting some reaction on Capitol Hill. The Judiciary Committee Chairman, Dick Durbin from Illinois, the senator from Illinois, blasted the FBI, saying the report shows that the new policies implemented by the FBI to address the egregious failures are effectively being ignored. It's shameful that the FBI continues to fail victims here. So some concerning reporting here, Jill, that I imagine we'll get some follow-up on Capitol Hill.
And now to that deadly Listeria outbreak from Deli meat. From CBS News, at least 9 people have died after being infected with Listeria from boar's head meats. This is according to federal health officials, and it comes after a massive recall last month. The new food poisoning toll includes 2 deaths in South Carolina, plus 1 each in Florida, New Mexico, Tennessee, and New York. 3 deaths were previously confirmed in people who lived in Illinois, New Jersey, and Virginia. And we're also learning that the U.S. Department of Agriculture inspectors turned up dozens of violations at a boar's head plant in Virginia that is now linked to a nationwide recall of deli meats, according to new records released by the department. That includes mold, mildew, and insects repeatedly found throughout the site. Last month, Boar's Head had to recall all of the deli meats made at this plant in Jarrett, Virginia, after that Listeria outbreak was blamed on products distributed from the site. The CDC says this is the largest Listeria outbreak since the 2011 outbreak that was linked to cantaloupe. Records released by the USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service to CBS News through a Freedom of Information Act request. So there have been a ton of violations at this plant, Moshe. It's unclear whether Boar's Head will face any penalties because of it. Reports published by the agency so far show that no enforcement actions have been taken against the company, at least in the past year. In a statement, Boar's Head says the company deeply regrets the impact of the recall and that food safety is their, quote, absolute priority. All operations have been suspended at that Jarrett plant, and the company is working to disinfect it and retrain employees. But Moshe, some of the violations are pretty gross, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, especially how omnipresent Boar's Head meats are. You know, you go to the grocery store and you go to the deli meat, and there's a lot of it there. Beyond issues like paperwork lapses and leftover meat on equipment, they show that inspectors faulted Boar's Head several times for mold and mildew building up around their facilities. Again, this facility in Jarrett. They also found mold and mildew around the hand washing sinks for the workers tasked with meats that are supposed to be ready to eat. They found a black mold-like substance around one room. Other locations were found to have a number of issues of leaking or pooling water. They found green algae growth. Anyway, I'll leave it be. But they had a lot of issues here with these plants and the meat. There was another plant that had flies flying around out of vats of pickle left behind. Bugs, ants traveling down walls. Anyway, a lot of issues with Boar's Head, very concerning, especially as we continue to get the death toll here from this Listeria outbreak.
And finally, from CNN, Labor Day weekend will be busier than ever in many areas, but travelers will have at least one welcome source of relief: lower prices. Domestic travel over the 2024 Labor Day weekend forecast to be up 9% compared to last year, according to AAA. The TSA is preparing for its busiest Labor Day travel period on record. United Airlines and American Airlines say they are expecting their busiest Labor Day operations ever. So the question many of you might be thinking, if you are traveling, will the system be able to handle this additional strain?
Or do you need to pack your patience? Jill,
you always need to pack your patience.
Okay, all right, just making sure. Just make sure the patience is packed.
One travel expert says that barring a severe weather event, airlines should be able to handle the record crowds. Now, I mentioned lower prices. Compared with 2023, the travel company Hopper says they're seeing a 5% dip in airfare for Labor Day weekend, and airfare's down about 17% compared to the holiday weekend in 2019 before the pandemic. Hopper attributes the lower prices to high supply from airlines and better fuel prices. So as for those gas prices, Gas Buddy projecting that the average price of gas on Labor Day will be $3.27 a gallon, which is the lowest for the holiday since 2021 and 13% cheaper than last year.
So as for air travel, just a heads up to all of you who are flying today, today's the peak travel day for flying. The TSA expects to screen just under 2.9 million people, so good luck. And a friendly reminder, if you experience a significant delay or cancellation, you are legally entitled to a cash refund if you decide not to travel. So a heads up there, make sure to check out the Department of Transportation page there to make sure you know your rights as the airline if an airline tries to convince you otherwise. As for where people are going, Seattle, a top destination this year, up 30% from last year. Why? Well, it's a popular departure point for Alaska cruises, which are sold out for the weekend. This is a big period here, Jill. Anchorage, Juneau are among the top 10 listed destinations. We've looked into this. Maybe we'll get there next August, but this is a great season to be in Alaska, go fishing, etc. Beyond that, no surprise here in New York City, a big destination, as well as Orlando, the happiest place on earth.
Moshe, what are you guys doing for the weekend?
We're here. We're staying here. We're not flying anywhere for the weekend. We're mid-move. We will be moving in a week, so we're hanging out. But I do see here the AAA says that among the top destinations in Europe this weekend, which I imagine some of you will show up in my Instagram feed, Paris, Rome, Barcelona, Dublin. International travel, though, is slightly down from last year.
All right, it is Friday. Cheers to the freaking weekend. Time for what we are watching, reading, and eating. Moshe, kick it off. What are you watching?
So there's a new season out, Jill, over on Hulu of Only Murders in the Building, season 4. So we'll be looking to get back into that. I've got to catch up on a bit of season 3 there. And, of course, U.S. Open tennis continues this weekend, so we'll be watching that. What do you got going on?
All right, as I mentioned before, college football starts this weekend. My team, Michigan, plays on Saturday night. Jim Harbaugh, the former head coach, is now with the NFL. He's the head coach of the Chargers. So we'll see how the new Michigan coach does. Sharon Moore, Ohio State, also a favorite in my house, playing Saturday at 3:30. So Moshe, you know where we'll be, at least on Saturday.
Wait, Jill, are you rocking some gear right now?
Well, it is my husband's birthday.
Yes.
So I am wearing an Ohio State sweatshirt.
All right. If you're watching on YouTube, I caught it earlier. She hasn't panned the camera down, but I was like, oh, she's rocking Ohio State, that Michigan alum.
Moshe, don't tell anybody. It stays between us.
Us and all the people listening to this podcast.
Sticking with college football, there is a documentary on Netflix called Untold Sign Stealer. It dives into the Connor Stalions allegations that he illegally stole other teams' signs for Michigan. He was forced to resign. He says in this documentary that he did nothing wrong. My husband says he's lying through his teeth.
Yeah, this is high interest for college football fans.
All right, Moshe, what are you reading?
I just finished Reconnected by Carlos Whitaker, friend of the pod at LoSwit. He's a premium member. You might know him on Instagram. He raises money for incredible causes. And we're highly connected. I was like, the irony here, Carlos, is I wouldn't know you without Instagram. But your newest book, you went 7 weeks living with monks and then living with the Amish to see what that did to his brain. He literally got his brain scanned before and afterward and talked about the experience, realizations he made. It's a fascinating book, Reconnected. We'll link to it here in the show notes. If you're a premium subscriber, the podcast is out today on the premium pod. We talk about the lessons that he learned. Among the many, Jill, is that there is something, he says, to not being able to access information immediately, to the concept of wondering. That you might not know something, and it wasn't so long ago that you're like, oh, let's talk about it. What do you think happened? As opposed to going straight to Google. He also talks about how he will no longer use Google Maps because he's using a part of his brain to remember directions. So he'll write down directions, like take a left here, take a right here, and do it that way. He also talked about like the importance of solitude. And then my favorite is he coins what's called Godspeed. Godspeed, he says, is 3 miles per hour. 3 miles per hour is the speed you walk at. He calls it Godspeed. And what you notice about humanity, nature, things around you when you walk at 3 miles per hour without a device. Which is how humans got around for like the first, several 100,000 years of human history. So I think whether you're super connected, whether you're into this sort of stuff, whether you're not, like, I think it's a great book, and I can't speak highly enough about Carlos. And again, if you're a premium member and you want the Cliff's Notes conversation, go become a premium member today at mo.news/premium and get access to that podcast.
Moshe, I had actually read an article about a study which talked about how we're not using a big part of our brain because we're so reliant on Waze and Google Maps.
Yeah.
And it's increased the risk of dementia and Alzheimer's. So I myself have started to not just automatically plug things into Waze. When I really don't know where I'm going, I will use it. But I used to just do it like on default and just not pay attention to anything and just look kind of at the
put it in for the corner store.
Yeah, exactly. And now I've stopped doing that since I read that report. Really interesting. I look forward to that.
Yeah, 2005 called, MapQuest called, printing out directions. Or like, oh my God, like take a left at the McDonald's, go up 2 blocks at the traffic light, make a right. You work a different part of your brain there. Jill, what are you reading this weekend?
So I'm going to mention a podcast that I just listened to instead of a book. It's from Honestly. It's called Debate: How We Fix American Education, which certainly is broken because America is the richest country in the world, but we really lag when it comes to everything from science scores to math scores. In 2018, we were actually ranked 125th in literacy. So I listened already to this podcast. The experts debate everything from the power of teachers unions to DEI in schools to charter schools. And it's interesting, and it definitely gives you some food for thought.
A timely topic as we head into the school year.
All right, Moshe, what are you eating this weekend?
I'm told, I just checked in with Alex. I go, what are we eating this weekend? She goes, we're going to the North Fork of Long Island. So just tell the folks you're going to the farm stands on the North Fork of Long Island. And so there you have it. You were just up there, Jill.
I was, Moshe. And if there's one thing that they have there, besides for a lot of good wine, it's a lot of good food. So
a lot of good food and peach ice cream. I found some really great original peach and blueberry ice cream up there. Jill, what are you eating?
Well, it is a birthday week in this house, so we get yogurt and such birthday cake. So it's healthy yogurt on the bottom, topped with M&Ms, sprinkles, cookie dough, all the bad stuff. But we still can kind of feel not so guilty about it because it's technically low-fat yogurt.
Yeah, no, you should feel great about it. Did Mike hear the birthday wishes on the podcast? Did he get to the end yesterday?
He did. He said thank you for the shout out. He appreciated it. So yes, the mystery is solved. He does listen to the end of the podcast. We learn something new every day. Everyone have a wonderful holiday weekend. Enjoy the extra day off. Again, we won't be with you on Monday. We hope you can get through it, and we'll see you here on Tuesday. All right, bye, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend.